A velvet box rested in my palm, its weight insignificant compared to the burden crushing my chest. Anticipation and dread tangled inside me as I stepped into the softly lit dining room. Candles flickered on the table, their glow reflecting off the wine glasses I had meticulously arranged. My wife, Camille, sat across from me, her striking green eyes gleaming under the golden light. She wore the emerald dress I bought for our anniversary last year, the fabric clinging to her in ways that had once left me breathless. But tonight, something felt different. Her smile lacked warmth. The corners of her lips curled, but her gaze flickered toward her phone more than it met mine. A quiet unease slithered through me, but I pushed it aside. This moment was meant to be special. I had poured everything into this night, into this gift, hoping it would remind her of us, of what we had built together. Clearing my throat, I slid the box across the table. For you. Camille's fingers grazed the edge before she lifted it, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the lid. She hesitated, then flicked it open. The delicate bracelet inside shimmered under the candlelight, the diamonds spelling out her name in a delicate, elegant curve. A piece of my heart sat in that box, wrapped in gold and sentiment. Silence. Then laughter. Sharp, hollow, grating against my skin like broken glass. I stiffened, watching her head tilt back as the sound spilled from her lips, unfurling into the room like a cruel symphony. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out the crackling fire in the background. She shook her head, wiping the corner of her eye as if my gesture had been the funniest joke she had ever heard. "A bracelet?" she scoffed, disbelief dripping from every syllable. "You think this is what I want?" Confusion gripped me. "What do you mean?" Her eyes darkened, amusement fading into something sharper, something taunting. She set the box down with an air of finality, crossing her arms. "You really don't get it, do you?" Something inside me twisted. "Get what?" Camille exhaled, exasperated. This whole thing, the candles, the bracelet, the effort. She gestured around, her tone laced with condescension. "It's pathetic." My stomach turned to lead. The warmth in the room seemed to dissipate, replaced by a chill creeping into my bones. "I thought you'd like it," I admitted, voice quieter now, strained. She smirked, leaning forward. "Oh, I'm sure you did. But here's the thing." Her fingers toyed with the stem of her wineglass. "Women like me? We crave excitement, passion. Not—" She gestured dismissively at the box. "This." A pit formed in my gut. "So what do you crave?" Camille's lips parted, and for a second, something flickered behind her eyes. Then, just as quickly, she leaned back with an amused glint. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Her phone vibrated on the table, lighting up with a notification. My gaze flicked to the screen before she could grab it. A name flashed, one that shouldn't have been there. Damon, my best friend. The room shrank around me, walls pressing in as realization slammed into my chest like a freight train. My hands curled into fists beneath the table, nails biting into my palms. She noticed. A slow smile spread across her lips, taunting, unapologetic. "Oh, honey," she purred, reaching for her glass. "You look like you just saw a ghost." I swallowed, forcing my voice to remain steady. "How long?" She feigned innocence. "How long what?" My jaw tightened. "How long have you been fucking him?" Camille didn't flinch, didn't rush to deny it. Instead, she took a slow sip of her wine, savoring the moment. When she set the glass down, her gaze met mine, unrepentant. "Long enough." The words landed like a slap, searing into my skin. Heat rushed to my face, fury clawing at my throat, but I refused to let it show. Not yet. She tilted her head, studying me as if I were an experiment she had lost interest in. "You're not going to yell? Break something? Cry?" I exhaled, slow and controlled. "That's what you want, isn't it?" Her smirk deepened. "Maybe." I leaned back, forcing a casualness I didn't feel. Then I won't give you the satisfaction. Something flickered in her expression. Annoyance, perhaps. She had expected an explosion, a scene, but I had never been the kind of man to lose control. No, I preferred a different approach. Her fingers tapped against the table, restless. You'll get over it, she said eventually, as if my pain was an inconvenience. You always do. My chest tightened, but I masked it with a slow nod. Maybe. She rose from her chair, stretching as if this conversation had been nothing more than a mild inconvenience. I'm heading out, she announced, already reaching for her coat. To him? She didn't bother denying it. Don't wait up. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with nothing but the lingering scent of her perfume and the remnants of my shattered illusions. I stared at the untouched meal before me, my appetite long gone. The bracelet remained in its box, mocking me with its gleam. My fingers found the edge of the table, gripping hard enough to make my knuckles ache. A deep breath. Then another. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Hours bled into the night as I sat in the dimly lit dining room, replaying Camille's laughter in my head. The venom in her voice, the way she had mocked my gift, the blatant arrogance in her confession, it all churned inside me, igniting something darker than mere anger. Betrayal, sharp and unrelenting, carved itself into my bones. But I wasn't the type to crumble, no. I preferred precision. I preferred control. And I was going to make sure Camille regretted every single word. I picked up the bracelet from the box, rolling it between my fingers. She had sneered at it, but she had no idea what I had planned. My phone buzzed against the table. Damon. For a second, my grip tightened, the sheer audacity of it nearly making me laugh. Did he think I didn't know? That I wouldn't find out? I exhaled slowly, then answered. Yeah? His voice came through smooth, casual, as if he wasn't screwing my wife behind my back. Hey man, just checking in. You busy? I leaned back, tapping the bracelet against the wood. Not at all. Good. Want to grab a drink? Talk some things through. I almost admired the nerve. Almost. Sure, I said easily. How about the Ember Room? It's been a while. A pause. He hadn't expected that. Camille and I had shared countless evenings at the Ember Room. It was our spot, a place drenched in memories. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he didn't. Either way, it didn't matter. Yeah, that works. He finally replied. See you in 30? See you then. I ended the call, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My own eyes looked foreign, colder, harder. Perfect. The Ember Room hummed with low jazz music and the clink of glasses. A deep red glow bathed the space, casting long shadows against the mahogany walls. I stepped inside, scanning the crowd until I spotted him near the bar. Damon sat with an easy confidence, sipping from a glass of bourbon. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his suit crisp and tailored. He looked like a man without worries, a man enjoying the spoils of a life he hadn't earned. I approached, keeping my expression neutral. Damon. He turned, flashing that familiar grin, the same one I had trusted for years. Glad you made it, man. Been a while since we caught up. I slid onto the stool beside him, signaling the bartender for a drink. Yeah, too long. He raised his glass. Two old friends. I clinked mine against his, the irony thick in the air. For a moment, we drank in silence. Then he set his glass down, studying me. You good? You seem different. I chuckled, swirling my whiskey. Just been thinking a lot. About? I turned to him, meeting his gaze head on. Betrayal. Damon's fingers tightened around his glass. Subtle, but I caught it. I smiled. Funny thing about trust, huh? It's strong until it isn't. Then, when it breaks, you realize it was never as solid as you thought. He swallowed, setting his drink down. Look, man. I cut him off. How long have you been fucking Camille? His face paled. He glanced around as if seeking an escape. But there was none. I... Save it, I interrupted, voice eerily calm. You know what the worst part is? I saw you as a brother. I would have done anything for you. Guilt flickered across his face, but it was too late for that. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, plain envelope. This is for her. I want you to give it to Camille. Damon eyed it warily. What is it? I smirked, sliding it toward him. Consider it a parting gift. He hesitated before finally picking it up. Make sure she opens it, I added. Damon exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. Look, man, I messed up. Messed up? I laughed softly. That's one way to put it. I didn't mean... I stood abruptly, cutting him off. Enjoy your drink, Damon. He called my name, but I was already walking away, satisfaction humming beneath my skin. The wheels were in motion. By the time Camille opened that envelope, everything she thought she had would be reduced to ashes. Damon would give Camille the envelope. That much I knew. He was weak, predictable. He had no spine, no control over the situation anymore. Camille, on the other hand, thrived on manipulation, on twisting the knife and laughing as the blood ran. But this time, she wouldn't be the one holding the blade. I drove home with steady hands, the night air cool against my skin as the city blurred past. Inside me, there was no rage, no tremor of doubt, just a singular focus, sharpened by betrayal. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Camille's car was already there. She was back, probably fresh from Damon's bed, thinking she had me wrapped around her finger. I stepped inside. The lights in the living room glowed warmly, but the air felt cold, sterile. I found her reclining on the couch, a glass of red wine cradled in her manicured fingers. She barely glanced up. You're home late, she mused, swirling the drink. I shut the door behind me, shrugging off my jacket. Had a drink with Damon. That got her attention. Her grip on the glass tightened for a fraction of a second before she masked it with a smirk. Oh? How is he? I chuckled, squirming. She arched a brow, feigning confusion. Squirming? Why would he be squirming? I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. Because I asked him how long you two have been fucking. Camille didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, studying me like a cat watching a mouse. And what did he say? Nothing useful. She smiled lazily, setting her glass down. You always were slow to catch on. My stomach clenched, but I didn't react. Not yet. And you always were reckless. Her expression faltered for just a moment, but she recovered. I don't know what you think you're doing, but... A knock at the door interrupted her. I checked my watch. Right on time. Camille frowned. Are you expecting someone? I simply smiled. Why don't you see for yourself? She shot me a suspicious look before standing, her silk robe swaying as she made her way to the door. I followed at a distance, watching as she swung it open. And there stood Damon. His face was pale, jaw tight. He didn't look at her. Instead, he held up the envelope, fingers clenched around it like it burned. You need to see this. Camille's brows furrowed as she took it, glancing at me over her shoulder. What is this? Go ahead, I encouraged, voice smooth. Open it. She hesitated, then ripped the flap open, pulling out the single sheet inside. Her eyes darted across the words, and then she froze. Her breath hitched, knuckles whitening as she gripped the paper. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. What? What is this? She whispered, barely audible. Damon swallowed hard. It's real, Camille. Her head snapped up, fury and fear warring in her gaze. You're lying. I stepped forward, savoring the unraveling. No, he isn't. She shook her head, looking between us, panic creeping in. This isn't possible. You wouldn't. Oh, but I did. Damon exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Jesus, man. I turned to him amused. What? Feeling guilty? He didn't answer. Camille, however, was still fixated on the letter. Her hands trembled as she reread it. Disbelief plastered across her face. No, you can't. This isn't happening. I leaned in, dropping my voice to a whisper. It already has. Her gaze snapped to mine, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw something I never thought I'd witness in her. Fear. The mighty, cruel, untouchable Camille had just realized she wasn't untouchable after all. And it was glorious. Camille's breathing came in short, uneven gasps. Her fingers trembled around the letter, crumpling the edges as if distorting the words could change their meaning. But reality had settled in, and there was no escaping it now. Damon stood stiff beside her, his jaw clenched. He still hadn't fully processed what I had done, but Camille? Oh, she understood. Her eyes darted between me and the paper, desperation creeping into her expression. You wouldn't, she whispered. I smiled, slow and deliberate. But I did. She shook her head, stepping back as if distance could somehow undo what she had just read. This isn't real. This has to be some sick joke. Damon finally found his voice. It's real, Camille. His tone was flat, hollow. He had spent the last few years indulging in stolen moments, thinking there would never be a price. Now he realized the debt had come due. She turned on him, wild-eyed. You knew? You knew about this and didn't say anything. He swallowed hard. I only just found out. Her lips curled into a sneer. And you just handed it to me? Just like that? Damon exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. What the hell else was I supposed to do? Camille's hands balled into fists, her body practically vibrating with fury. No, this doesn't happen to me. Her gaze swung back to me, sharp and accusing. How? How did you do this? I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Simple. While you were busy spreading your legs for him, I was busy taking everything from you. Her breath hitched. I continued, voice calm, measured. Remember when you laughed at my gift? When you mocked me, belittled me? That was the moment I decided to stop being your fool. That bracelet? It was never just a gift. It was a test. Her brows furrowed, confusion flickering behind the panic. I smirked. See, I already knew about you and Damon. Had known for months. But I needed confirmation. And when you laughed in my face, when you thought you had me wrapped around your little finger, I realized something. Her lips parted, but no words came. I realized you weren't just cheating on me, I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. You were underestimating me. She flinched. Damon stood frozen, silent as I unraveled the final threads of her world. The moment you dismissed that bracelet, you sealed your fate. That's when I put my plan into motion. I nodded toward the letter she still clutched. Signed divorce papers. A prenuptial agreement you forgot existed. One that strips you of every single asset because you committed adultery. Camille gasped, horror dawning in her expression. No, I... Oh, and one more thing, I added, savoring the way her world crumbled. The house? Not yours. The cars? Mine? The bank accounts? Frozen. You? You get nothing. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall, shaking. You can't do this. I smiled. I already did. Damon ran a hand down his face. Jesus, man, I turned to him. And you? You think you're safe? He stiffened. You didn't just steal my wife, Damon. You stole from the company. Embezzlement's a nasty little crime, especially when there's a paper trail. I tapped my temple. And guess who made sure every single transaction led back to you? His eyes widened in sheer terror. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward him. His own signature stared back at him on falsified financial documents. He paled. No, no, I tilted my head. I'd start packing if I were you. White-collar prison isn't as cushy as people think. Damon stumbled back, hands gripping his hair. Camille stood paralyzed beside him, her face ghostly pale. For the first time, they weren't in control. I was. I turned toward the door, inhaling the crisp night air. Camille's voice was barely a whisper. Please. I glanced over my shoulder. Tears pooled in her green eyes, the same ones that once held nothing but arrogance. Now they held fear. Please, she choked out, her voice raw. Don't do this. I smiled, slow and victorious. You already did it to yourself. Then I walked out, leaving them drowning in the ruins of their own betrayal.